Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this programme today we'll be discussing a newly publicised parliamentary report that looks into the issue of Jew hatred in our higher education, and we'll be asking what can be done to protect Jewish students from vile hatred. Warm welcome to the programme, and today's special guest is all the way from Sussex. He's a good friend of mine, Alistair Scott, the UK Director for Joseph Storehouse / Vision for Israel. Alistair, it's always good to have you on the programme. Would you just kindly give us an update on some of the ministry activities being carried out by Joseph Storehouse, or its new branding, or Vision for Israel?
Well, Vision for Israel and Joseph Storehouse are still very active, particularly in Israel at this time with all the threats and so on that are going on. We've been very active in putting bomb shelters all around the country, particularly down in the south, but also moving more and more into the northern areas, because everyone who is following things going on in Israel and the Middle East can see that the threats are now coming from beyond Gaza, and Lebanon and Syria, the borders there. So we are very actively doing that. Of course, we're continuing to have monthly Zoom meetings on the last Saturday of each month, usually, where people from all over the world are joining in, hearing updates from within the country, which is so important, isn't it? Because you and I know the news media don't tell much, don't give much information of what's really happening on the ground level. There they are more sensationalizing than telling truth. And it's so important for us to gather people, particularly those who are intercessors. They want to know the right way to pray. So it's very important for us to keep the information going out. We not only do it by the programs on Zoom, but also from newsletters, updates coming directly from Barrett in Jerusalem usually, but sometimes they're in the States too. Very important for us to keep alert in the spiritual realm to what's going on.
No, absolutely. And also, there are two important conferences, aren't there, that are involved. One in Poole, in the Lighthouse. Is that on Wednesday, the 13th of September? I think you did a great job when you were there last year, leading the worship and everything else, which was wonderful. And then, of course, also the Feast of Tabernacles conference, which is in October, isn't it?
And of course this year the Feast of Tabernacles, we're going regional. We're coming out of London for the first time in several years, and we'll be down in Brighton and Hove down there. So we really look forward to you going to be one of our guests, of course, and I'll be there as the support side, and sure I'll be leading a prayer or something during the event. But we look forward to just meeting face to face. I really do miss that face to face encounters with our great supporters. They are fantastic people, and they've stayed with Joseph Storehouse Vision for Israel for so many years, and they are such a faithful bunch.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you can get in touch with Alistair, or you can get in touch via the website if you want to attend any of those two conferences, one taking place in Brighton, the Feast of Tabernacles, and the other one called the Lighthouse Theatre in Poole. So if in the area, please go along, because it's so important that we attend these pro-Israel meetings, worship the Lord, but also share his love for Israel and the Jewish people. Alistair, what are your thoughts on the big problem that we face in this country in our higher education system, together with our university, the problem of Jew hatred, and also this need to protect Jewish students from this vile hatred, as we see that our society is plagued with Jew hatred, as we are seeing the record numbers of Jew hatred escalate in our time?
You know, this is probably one of the most dear things to my heart at the moment, and the intercession team that I'm part of. We really are praying for a change to come in the whole education system, but But you know, it has been a problem in high schools and in universities and colleges for decades. It's not just recent. It's something that's happened over a long period of time. But our prayers are really that God needs to bring a revival into the university students, into the college students, because they are the future leaders of commerce. They could be politicians and so on. And there's no doubt. I remember, I think you might have even been at one of the conferences when we had the ambassador for the Jewish Israel ambassador from London came to our conference in London, and he had been just the day before been invited to speak at a debate in one of the major universities. I won't name the university. And he arrived there with every intention of just sharing his heart and answering questions, and he wasn't allowed to speak because he was literally shouted down from the moment he walked in there to the moment he finally left with security, because they just wouldn't allow him to speak. And then he arrived at our conference in London, and he walked into this real love feast for Israel and for him particularly. And the guy, before he even sat down, I looked at him because I was alongside him in the front row. He had tears in his eyes, and when he finally got up to speak, he just shared the experience he'd had the day before and what a difference it was walking. And he said he came with a bit of trepidation because of his previous experience, wondering what sort of reception he would get. But this is the truth. This is what's happening, not only with ambassadors and leaders who are invited as guest speakers. They can be shouted down. But for the Jewish students going into universities, they find it a very tough time, very challenging time. And we need to be not only praying for them, but as a country, we need to be protecting them from some of the vile stuff that comes against them. And it's not just face-to-face. A lot of it is using the media. So
absolutely. I mean, I did a documentary years ago now, back in 2015, in the aftermath of the horrible ISIS terrorist attacks, both in Paris and also in Brussels. And we went to a school there where Israel's Minister of the Education was speaking, met and interviewed Jewish students, and they were sharing that in Brussels, I mean, this is not the UK, but this is in Brussels, that so many Jewish students from Belgium do not attend higher education or go to universities in Belgium. They either go to the States, they go to Israel, or they go to Britain, because they share that the level of Jew hatred they face is horrendous. Yeah. And one Jewish student shared an experience of how another fellow student tried to light his jacket and saying that, I want you to burn like your ancestors did in the Holocaust. So we know that this is a major problem and it needs tackling, but also it's a question of academic freedom of expression. If academic freedom of expression is challenged and threatened, if free speech is threatened, and ultimately Jewish people are threatened. So much is being done, and rightly so, to counter other forms of racism. But when it comes to the hatred of Jewish people, this is permitted and allowed in our society. So how important is it that our universities, our institutions of higher education get to grips with this? Because this is where Jewish people should feel safe to actually learn, rather than being attacked because they're Jewish, or being attacked because those that hate Israel see the Jewish people have an association with Israel, even if they may be British Jews and may not even have visited Israel, might not even be Zionists, but because they're Jewish, they automatically get that connection and link with Israel.
It's sad, isn't it, that you hear of stories where they even have to not wear their kippur, not wear their Star of David, not be seen to be Jewish people in order to just survive through a university course, which is so wrong. It's appalling that the situation is. I mean, we know racism in any form is terrible, shouldn't be allowed into our education system at nursery level or highest level at doctorates and universities. But as you say, it's a spiritual attack that comes against Jewish people, because it just seems like that spirit wants to destroy them, just as it did during the Second World War. They wanted to destroy, that Nazi spirit wanted to take all Jews out from the earth. And so I think it's very important for us as leaders in Christian circles, but also as Christians within the universities, to actually stand and defend. You know, the scriptures are so clear in Isaiah 62 that we're called to be watchmen on the walls and never hold our peace day or night, not be silent. But everything around us is trying to silence us. You know, this whole global move of us talking about having freedom of expression, freedom of thought. But when you come against the flow, what's accepted, you're just not allowed to speak. And this is the case with the Jew hatred that we're talking about. It just is. It's so over the top. It's like the Book of Esther, where, you know, one person offends you and you therefore want to make the whole race pay for it. So I do believe, not only as leaders and as a TV company like Revelation TV, we need to highlight the problem and challenge those universities. You know, I know in the report we're going to talk about, they haven't named the universities that are specifically the worst, but we need to just be willing to go into the realms of education and challenge and pray for our government. I mean, our government at the moment is very pro-Israel in many ways, but I think they need to take a firmer hand in the education service, and particularly in the university level. It's not quite as bad at the lower levels, but it's there. It's there, and it's there on the streets. So we need to challenge our MPs, we need to challenge our Prime Minister, the Minister of Education, all those others, and say, look, this is not right. We want to see something changed. And that was something else that ambassador said to me. He said, you know, you have to write letters, because if you don't, they just won't answer. They won't take it seriously. Even newspapers, editors, if they get more mail about Islamic or Hinduism than the anti-Israel, anti-Jewishness, they will side with whatever they hear more from. So it's very important for us to be active, proactive in our challenging of what is not righteous.
Absolutely. But also it's a kind of problem as well in the way that our kind of universities are actually set up, Alistair, that they have so much funding that comes from the Middle East. Some of them Israel's enemies. I mean, like the Iranian regime funds many of our universities, particularly the Middle East departments. So does the Saudis, so do the Gulf states. And so that comes with it their own kind of viewpoint and their own bias, because the universities need that money in order to pay for their facilities and lectures, that then compromises on their kind of academic freedom of expression, so creates a climate that becomes anti-Israel because of the money that's coming into the universities. And of course the government can't fund our universities like they did before. So it's a problem of, well, where does the funding come in? How much funding has an influence then on the curriculum and the university courses, and what do these Middle Eastern donors expect from these universities in return? These are just very important questions that we also have to ask and discuss.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. You're a slave to the one who pays your bills, basically, isn't it? And I think that's been more and more apparent in the last 20, 30 years, because there is huge funding. I was ministering, funnily enough, with Joseph Storehouse. We were doing a regional conference in Exeter, and we were being taken around, just doing the tour before the conference, and we were taken in to the university, and they were so openly saying, well, all this work, all this new building has been funded from Libya. And Nottingham, similar thing. I was ministering in Nottingham, and as I was driving in, the guy with me was saying, all these new buildings for the students, they've all been funded from the Middle East nation, an Islamic nation. And you realize that that's happened more and more. And therefore, these guys are not doing it because they want us to be the best educated people in the world. They want to influence the education that our major future leaders are going to be carrying. So there's definitely going to be a bias, and it's getting more and more and more into more universities. There's just two that I've talked about that had personal experience, but I'm certain that there are many others that are bringing in funding, because the money is coming in now from the oil-rich countries, and they are not doing it for any other reason that they can have more of an influence over our young people. And we must make sure that our young people realize that they are in some ways being used.
No, absolutely. And I suppose the other problem facing Jewish students and even Israeli students at our university campuses is during what is known as Apartheid Week, where we see all the lies come out against Israel during Palestinian, or Israel, it's called Israel Apartheid Week. Israel is then accused of being an apartheid. They kind of do mock fights with Israeli soldiers, killing so-called innocent Palestinians to give the impression that Israel is a brutal apartheid regime that separates Israel from the Palestinian Arabs. I mean, nothing could be further than the truth. And those who have actually lived through an apartheid have actually said that there is no way that Israel is an apartheid. There isn't. I mean, you and I have been to Israel so many times. You only have to look at the road markings to see that they're in Hebrew, English, and Arabic. Yes. Their public toilets, again, they're not just for Jews only, open to Arabs as well. We have Arabs in the Israeli government, in the Supreme Court. So there is no apartheid. And when it comes to the Palestinian Authority itself, that's probably where the real apartheid lies, because Jewish people are not allowed to visit any section of the Palestinian Authority. If they do, their life's in danger. So, and also the treatment of Palestinians across the Middle East is horrendous. So that's where the real apartheid is actually taking place. But for Jewish students, to see this hatred against Israel then turns into Jew hatred against Jewish people, and particularly Jewish students. And this just flames it. So why do our universities allow these lies and these awful events like Israel Apartheid Week to take place? If they are serious about confronting anti-Semitism, then surely they need to stamp this out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the trouble with lies is that if it's repeated long enough, people begin to, and particularly for students, if they're getting these lies or deceptions coming from their lecturers, their seniors, it becomes difficult for them to dispute it. And you know as well as I do, we take people over to Israel really so that they actually see for themselves what is the truth. You know, the Arabs who are working in Israel are well looked after, much better than the ones in Gaza, much better than the ones in the West Bank, or I don't like referring to it as the West Bank because it is Judea and Samaria. But I remember being there with a party on a Friday. We'd just come through one of the tunnels, and myself and the tour guide were waiting for the group to come through, because we split up into two groups, and I was there with the first group with him. And it was Friday afternoon, and of course it's prayer time for the Islamic communities, and you suddenly hear the minarets going from one side of Jerusalem right across to the other. And he turned to me and he said, we are accused of being apartheid. We are accused of being enforcing our faith on other faith groups. And he said, listen to that. This is Jerusalem, the center of our faith. What Psalm 122 tells us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. It's the center of everything. David's whole kingdom began in that area. And he said, you can hear right across Jerusalem, the Muslim people are gathering together on a Friday afternoon, and they're praying. We don't know if they're praying against us or for us or anything like that, but they have that freedom of expression, that freedom of practicing their religion right across the whole of Jerusalem, as loud as they like. And they said, could we as Jews do this in, let's say, well, let's not name the names, but any of the Arab states? Would we be allowed to express our religious freedom in the same way as they're doing here in our nation? And it's not restricted to Jerusalem. It's the same in Tel Aviv, it's the same in Haifa, in any of the major cities, in any of the places where the Islamic community are strong. And I said, you're absolutely right. He implored me, he said, you must bring people over and let them see for themselves, so that they would see we're not an apartheid state. We can have extremists like every nation. I mean, I'm not saying that Israel is the perfect nation, the perfect government, the perfect state. No, but show me the one that is, and then I'll be buying my first ticket, a one-way ticket to be there. But it's doing what is right in the same standards as we have. They're allowing people. Yes, we'll have extreme opposition to whatever other faiths are there, but generally the government, the forces, the IDF, the police forces are there to protect religious freedom and not to stand against it. So I mean, it spoke to me, and it made me realize how important it is for us to bring more and more people. See for yourself, and then you can decide who's lying and who's telling the truth.
No, absolutely. So what do you make of the new Parliamentary Taskforce on anti-Semitism in higher education that's been set up to confront Jew hatred? And there's a copy of the actual report that was published on Monday, the 22nd of May, 2023.
It's so important for this to come out. I haven't read it all the way through. I don't know if you have, but it's important for us, firstly, as a nation, to acknowledge there is a problem. Because, you know, like everything, unless you acknowledge there is a problem, you're not going to try or even aim to do anything about it. So this report is it's about time. It's taken a long time to get it out, and that's right, because you need to do thorough research. There's no point just doing a very small research and come out with a conclusion. So I think it's very important, but beyond having a report, now they have to challenge the places where they need to be challenged to get this right. So I think it's a great starting point, but it's not the end, it's the beginning.
Absolutely, but I think the government needs a lot of credit here by appointing Lord John Mann. Firstly, he was a very prominent Labour member of Parliament who put his neck out confronting the issues of Jew hatred in the House of Commons. I found it a very difficult ride during Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, but he's stood firm, and he's been rewarded now with a place in the House of Lords, and he's been appointed as the government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism. So it shows that the government is actually taking this issue seriously, and they are working with John Mann then to produce this report that looks into the problem of Jew hatred in higher education and our universities, so they can give policy recommendations to government in order to eradicate Jew hatred from our university campuses, which has got to be welcomed, surely.
It's got to be. And you know, I think one of the things he actually said in the report was something along the lines of he wasn't going to name the universities that are particularly bad, but he knows who they are, and he's going to keep a very close eye and confront what needs to be confronted. And that's great. It's wonderful to have somebody given that position. It's a special position to watch over and do something about what is going on in our universities. Yeah. And
but he has come under criticism for this report, particularly from the JNS, which is the Jewish News Syndicate, that I got the original idea for the programme, which led me to the actual report itself, where they actually felt that they should name those universities and higher places to say that this is not a safe place to Jews. So there becomes almost like a league table, so people are aware that this university or this place of higher education has a problem with Jew hatred on their campus, in their facilities, and surely that's the way to deal with it, is to name and shame different universities. And they did consult with 56 universities, and we can see them all on screen there, including the university that I attended as well, which is number 44, the University of Manchester. Which is so important, because you know, universities are a place they should be a place of academic freedom of expression, a place to learn and develop ideas and concepts, and which really does help, you know, as a young student, it really does provide you with a wonderful advantage in life, and to have that university experience as well. So I mean, this is where I first met Jewish people. This is why I got involved in what's known as JSOC, the Jewish Union, because they all had a tremendous love for Israel, and I didn't find that with the Christians that I met. So I spent a lot of time with the Jewish community, making Jewish friends. So for me, that was absolutely invaluable. But it's so important now that the government and also this Parliamentary Taskforce are really taking this issue of anti-Semitism in higher education seriously.
I can understand what the JNS are saying, but as I said earlier, it's really just a starting point we're at, and I think, particularly for the Jewish community, they need to know the universities that are need to be shamed, so to speak, you know, be named and shamed, because they don't want to be applying to universities that may be so anti, although, you know, even that's a compromise. We really want to clean up the act rather than say don't go there. It's like, you know, for any of us, we know areas in our towns and cities where you know, it's not the best place to be, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do something about cleaning up that area and making sure it's patrolled. And so I think it is a great starting point, and I hope that they will start to take positive actions in those specific universities to get things changed. And you know, whether it means you have to change leadership, the top level of those guys who are running the universities, they need to be made known that it's not acceptable to have any kind of Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, whatever you want to refer it to, because it's just not the right thing for a nation. As you say, universities are places for academy, it's for people to be educated, it's for people to, you start to grow up. I don't know about you, going to university is so much an important part of your growing up stage. You get your independence, but also you get to know people from all sorts of backgrounds, and increases your heart's love for them and understanding. And I love talking to Jewish people. I love talking to Hindus, Buddhists, anything to find out what really they have in their heart. But so the university should be a safe place for people of all types of faiths, all types of ideas, even those of no faith, gathering together and getting to know each other, not building up any kind of hatred to any particular person, but particularly for our Jewish brothers and sisters. We need to protect them. They're a blessing. You know, the biblical truth is that they are blessed to be a blessing, and I can really agree with that totally. So we need to accept them. We need to not only accept them, we need to see that they're able to thrive, that they're not in any way seeking protection, because they are a special people. They are a special people, and they deserve all the rights that we have.
Absolutely. What was surprising, though, is that my former university, for example, had the biggest, if not one of the biggest, Jewish societies in the country, and now very few Jewish people attend at my university, primarily because of the attacks and experiences of Jew hatred they faced on campus. Now, I knew it was bad in the 90s, in the mid-90s when I attended. I mean, you know, this is almost approaching 30 years on from there, and the situation is far worse 30 years on than it is now. Not quite 30, but almost 30 years. But I just want to tell you and our viewers some of the main findings of this Parliamentary Taskforce on anti-Semitism in higher education and our universities. So it says that they found, for example, that it was commonplace for Jewish students not to wear certain clothing or jewellery around campus because it would make them identify as being a Jewish. Jewish students reportedly spoke of an underlying fear of being targeted over their backgrounds of being expected to answer questions about Israel. This is what was reported by the Parliamentary Taskforce on Anti-Semitism in higher education. And other students also confirmed they were reluctant to attend seminars or lectures around issues such as Israel for fear of personal interrogation. Now, it's one thing to be a Jewish student, but it's another one to actually be a Zionist on campus, standing up and defending Israel with all the hatred and the vitriol and everything they would face doing that. So this is one thing that the report has recommended. But why should a Jewish person feel threatened because they wear a Magen David or a Star of David necklace, or wear an actual kippah on the head, or identify as being Jewish from their clothing or their dress sense, and then face persecution because they are seen to be Jewish?
It's madness, isn't it? Because in the universities, if you are a Hindu or a Muslim and you wear whatever signifies you to be that, there's no problem with that. And yet, for the Jewish people, I mean, I wear a Star of David, even though I'm not a Jew, just as a sign that I'm in support of them. And there are times when I'm in certain places and I'm aware. Most of the time I'm not even aware I'm wearing it. But sometimes when I'm up in London or something, when I'm on an outreach, and I think, oh wow, I have got my Star of David. I'm not going to take it off. But you're aware of it. So how much more for a Jewish person to be concerned that somebody will look at the ringlets or look at their kippur or look at what they're wearing around their neck and associate them with an opportunity to speak something out or even attack. I mean, we've seen it in London over and over again, where folks in Jewish communities have been attacked just because they have the ringlets. The older people, I remember the terrible story, and it was on the news, of the old man who was shutting down his shop, and a guy walked past him and then turned around and came and started kicking him, an old man in his 70s or 60s, and he was being attacked by this young man simply because he was Jewish. And so it's not just a problem in the university, it's a problem in our community. But a university is a great place to start confronting that, because if the universities and the students begin to realize this is not right, they deserve every other right, it will affect our communities too. So yeah, for every Jewish person I know, I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to them, it's important for them not to be walking in fear, but walking in the freedom that all the rest of us, yes, there will be times any of us could be in the wrong place at the wrong time and be attacked, but with the Jews, they're specifically attacked because of their Jewish roots. And that's a very, very sad indictment on our nation.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at this report from CBN entitled Jewish Free Zones at Berkeley University in California. It's not the UK, but it's similar things are happening. And if it happens in the States, it's going to happen in our country eventually. So let's have a look at this troubling news report put together by friends at CBN.
The notion that it should be, acceptable for only 9 student organizations at a law school to exclude Jews from opportunities just because there are others that say it's okay. What would he say if the mayor said there are 9 neighborhoods where Black, Hispanic, or Chinese people can't live, but don't worry because there are many others where they can live? What if there had been any other context in which any other group was shut out of opportunities? Would a law school dean in the 21st century say, not to worry, it's okay to have 9 segregated areas, just so long as we have many other areas that aren't segregated? I think he should be embarrassed about having made this argument. It's utterly absurd, ridiculous, and inconsistent with American law.
So is this speech ban anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, or just anti-Israel?
Well, it's all of those. Pick your poison. To begin with, it is a method of silencing one side of a political debate. It is a way of saying we should not permit anyone to participate in a discussion on campus if they are pro-Israel. This is anti-discourse, it's anti-speech, it's anti-education. It prevents even someone who is critical of Israel from having an informed education on the topic. But it's also anti-Jewish because the overwhelming majority of American Jews support Israel and consider support for Israel to be an important part of their identity as Jewish Americans. So when these groups say no Zionists, they are almost effectively saying no Jews. Dean Chemerinsky, to his credit, concedes that this would block him from speaking to these groups, and he says that it would also potentially block 90% or so of his law students from speaking to these groups. In addition, it would no doubt prevent some of the faculty as well. So it is a considerable assault on free speech, but it's beyond that. It's also discriminatory and an assault on the Jewish community.
And you're a graduate of Berkeley Law School. In addition to serving as Assistant Secretary of Civil Rights at the Department of Education, you served as Staff Director at the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. I'd say you know Berkeley law and civil rights well. So is this a civil rights violation? Would there be a case here against Berkeley, your alma mater?
Well, you know, I am a litigator and a civil rights lawyer, and the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights under law does file lawsuits in cases such as this. I don't want to say right now what we're going to do, but it is hard to look at this circumstance and to argue that the University of California is complying with federal law. They are a public institution. They are bound by the Constitution, including the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, as well as the various civil rights statutes protecting students, protecting lecturers, and protecting others.
And what can you tell us about other university campuses? Are we seeing similar bylaws, similar bans on pro-Israel speech?
Well, Berkeley is unfortunately exceptional in some respects, but representative in others. What starts in California often spreads, which means that if we don't fight back and fight back hard, we're going to see it in other places. But we have seen some roughly similar situations on other campuses, including both undergraduate and law school campuses, in which Jewish students are being marginalized and excluded for their Jewish identity, and specifically for the Zionist aspect of their Jewish identity. What we've been seeing on many campuses is efforts to impeach Jewish pro-Israel members of student government or student judiciaries. We're also seeing efforts to block Jewish student organizations from participating in more general student activities, especially with progressive student organizations. And we're seeing a general effort to marginalize and exclude the Jewish community, to create the notion that Jews and the Jewish community and establishment are simply not a normal part of life on college and university campuses. What's happening at Berkeley Law now is in some respects unique, but in some respects it is simply the latest in what is clearly a nationwide trend, and an ugly one. And
what can our viewers do about it?
Well, everyone can respond in a different way. Certainly, if anybody is connected with the University of California in any way, they should make their voices heard directly to the University of California. Those who live in the state of California should communicate with legislators as well as trustees at the University of California. But in general, it is useful to have people raising their voices in whatever ways they can, whether it's by writing articles or op-eds or simply comments on website postings, or providing support for the various groups that support Jewish students and academics.
And it's very, very dangerous for a university like the University of California in Berkeley to have Jew-free zones. Absolutely frightening. It's reminiscent of 1930s and Nazi Germany, something that we can't tolerate, and certainly we should not allow anything like that to come here to our shores in the United Kingdom. Alistair, and it does remind me of these things, that the hatred that surrounds the Jewish people, that surrounds the Jewish nation, which is the nation of Israel, and having representatives from Israel speak at so many of our university campuses become nothing but a hate fest, as you mentioned earlier in the program. And I've had enough Jewish guests on the program that have even told me, like my good friend Sharon Claff, who was actually beaten up at one of our university Londons because she attended a pro-Israel meeting there as well. So we know that the violence is there, and once you start to ban Jewish societies, and when I was at the University of Manchester back in 1996, they tried to ban the JSOC, the Jewish Union, because of its association with Israel. Altogether, that was a pretext for the Islamic Society to take over the union. But the fact that one society think that they can ban another is very, very reminiscent of the 1930s with the Nuremberg laws. We know that Jewish people were prevented from going to universities, that Jewish lecturers at universities were dismissed and sacked from their jobs, so the universities became a free zone. If we don't cherish and love our kind of Jewish community and our Jewish students at universities and treasure them for who they are, then we're in danger of allowing darkness, authoritarianism to actually take over our universities, and dangerous ideologies will emerge out of it.
For sure, and this is such an alert for all of us in our nation. As you said, we do not want to see this infiltrating the university system here. But you know, when you think of America for decades, they've been the friend of Israel, you know, and to see this happening now during this season, this time that we're living in USA, and we hear of things happening in Europe far more than we do even in our nation. But there's a threat out there. There is a marginalizing the Jewish people because they are a smaller group of people in the nations in the world. I mean, you know, we've got 15 million Jews throughout the globe, which is such a small amount when you compare it with the Hindus, the Indians, the Chinese, even the Brits. And it's so easy to marginalize them because they're small and they can be kind of you can almost bully this and use them as a scapegoat. And we've got to make sure in our nation that that is not allowed to happen. Watching that clip there has made me even more alert to be telling people the truth of what's going on. And you know, I said at the beginning, it's on my heart to pray for universities, because a lot of our universities have seen revivals in the past, and we need to pray for our universities to come back to godliness, come back to the fear of the Lord, and do what is right in God's eyes. And you know, if we see things like this coming into our nation, we really got to make a noise about it. We mustn't sit back and think, oh well, it's a one-off case. Well, if one case comes through, it tends to multiply very quickly. So for USA, we really need to pray that Berkeley University that is cleansed out from this wrong thinking. And you can see just from the bits of film we've seen how hostile the people are against Jewish people. Why? What have they done? You know, what have they done to deserve this? Nothing. They've done it. It's just something, because they are who they are, that they get picked upon.
Of course, and their contribution to Western society in
Incredible.
Terms of the sciences, in terms of
I think
literature.
that's part of the problem. I don't think the general public know how much the Jewish people contribute to all nations. You know, everything from your phone and that you might be using. The whole technology is developed in the land of Israel. So yeah, I think that's something also education needs to just remind people in the world. This small nation has come about with medical advances, with technological advances, and they are people we should be thankful to and not looking to subdue them.
Exactly. Also, this task force established by the government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism, Lord Mann, which is supported by the all-party parliamentary group against anti-Semitism, was shocked to learn that some of the staff kept their Jewish identity secret to avoid from other colleagues at work. So there isn't just a problem here at our universities and places of higher education with Jewish students facing anti-Semitism or Jew hatred or their association with Israel, but it's also university lecturers that may be Jewish, and those who work in our institutions of higher education are also fearful about revealing their Jewish identity because they fear that they may be marginalised or face abuse from other lecturers. But that's also not right either, because we need Jewish lecturers and those who work at universities as well who are Jewish to actually be free to be who they are.
Absolutely, and you know, even within the church, we need to know why we should be standing with the Jewish people, and the thought that somebody who's a lecturer in a university is not feeling free to say I'm Jewish or I'm, you know, of a certain persuasion, a certain choice of faith. That's a very, very sad situation to be in, and we've got to make sure that's turned around. And like most things, will begin by a people of prayer praying in the right way and seeing this as an unrighteous act and an injustice in society. And we've got to make sure it's turned around and stand against and confront and speak out against these situations. If you're living in a university town and you're aware of this going on, get in there, get a group together, not only to pray, but to actually talk to people. And let's reach out to our Jewish brothers and sisters wherever they are and show them that not everybody thinks the way these minorities. And they do tend to be minorities, but they tend to be loud minorities. They make a lot of noise and they get themselves publicity. So we got to make sure that we are even better and more proactive at letting the Jewish people, we stand with them.
Right, but I'm just going to read out some more of this report as well. So the report confirms that Jewish students generally have a positive university experience, which is great, but recognise the rise in anti-Semitic instances on campus relating to Zionism or Israel. And of course, this is the touch paper. It says that Nicola Richards MP and Catherine McConnell who are the co-chairs of the all-party parliamentary group against anti-Semitism, said of this report, our campuses should be places of exploration, education, and investigation, a place to challenge and to be challenged. Too often they have been a breeding ground for anti-Jewish racism. The report we published today shows some of the excellent practices taking place in the UK campuses, but also the frightening experience to which Jewish students and staff have been subjected to. But also I think we have to draw a line and look at this parliamentary report put together by the Task Force to Confront Anti-Semitism in Higher Education, together with the Community Security Trust that provides security for the Jewish community, but they also provide a kind of annual survey on the level of reported instances of Jew hatred in this country. So in their latest report for 2022 that was published a few months ago, they say that the report demonstrated that anti-Semitism on campus has risen by 22% in the past 2 years. So we see that from the pandemic and out of the pandemic, we see that Jew hatred has arisen. And of course, what we're also seeing with this as well, again, so many of these conspiracy theories, you find that the very heart of these conspiracy theories is Jew hatred at the very centre. And this also explains why we're seeing, again, a rise of hatred at university level against students.
Yeah, I mean, thoughts? It's been such a sad reflection because I've met with students, children who go to school in Jewish schools, and they've had to get used to the fact that now their schools are covered with barbed wire, that they've got security men at the doors. You know, why should we do that? Why should any part of society, why should the Jewish people have to suffer and actually get used to this as being normal? Because it's not normal. I mean, if my child or my grandson is going to nursery school or to the primary school or to a secondary school and he's having to go through a security system like that, it's just not right. And we mustn't even start to adjust to thinking, oh, well, as long as we're providing them with security systems, that's okay, because it isn't. There should be a freedom for the Jewish person to go out and enjoy life, enjoy education, not only in schools and in the special Jewish schools, but into higher education, into the universities, and not be feeling the pressure to hide who they are, because they're an important part of our society.
Absolutely. I'm just going to draw something else as well, because the report also, and the articles that have been written on the report also reflected on the fact that the National Union of Students, known as the NUS, also was recently subject to an independent Casey-led investigation, which found there was a long history of anti-Semitism within the union. And that it was a hostile environment for Jewish students. And last week, apparently, that the Goldsmith announced another barrister-led investigation into anti-Semitic claims. Now, trouble is, though, what I think has happened at our universities is that the issue of Israel, the issue of the kind of Palestinian cause has become one of those kind of trendy issues to take up at universities. So it seems that they take this up at university because they believe all the lies and everything they are fed, because they don't, and maybe that's a problem with the generations now at university, that we're not taught to be critical thinkers anymore. Yeah. And instead we see the majority following the herd, accepting ideas and beliefs without actually challenging them, to say, well, where's the evidence, where's the facts? Yes. So it feels like as a society, and this is reflected on universities as well, that we've moved away from reason, and we've moved away from fact, and it's based on emotion. There is no absolute truth. Truth is whatever you want it to be, even though that would actually defy physics in itself and defy science. It seems to be that is the thinking. So when it comes down to this one, when Israel has to protect herself from Hamas's rockets or missiles, and we know that Israel faces a very precarious situation in the north of Israel with rockets and missiles. If the Israeli Air Force have to defend Israel and the Israeli army defend the nation of Israel, then this is where we see this huge hatred rise and hatred against Israel, and that then spills out on campus, and we see that students then become filled with hatred and start attacking Jewish students and anyone associated with Israel. because they're not prepared to look at the facts for themselves. And this is another reason why I believe this program is so important, because we provide the evidence, we provide the facts. This is not propaganda. Everything we're saying is actually based on evidence.
Yes, it's based on research and truth. I mean, I know from personal experience working with Joseph Stonehouse and Vision for Israel that whenever there is a conflict with Gaza or with Lebanon, the attacks against Jewish communities in the nation increase rapidly. But now it seems to be just, as you say, it's almost like a trendy thing to come against certain mindsets, thinking patterns, and it's wrong. It's wrong and needs to be addressed, it needs to be confronted, it needs to be changed. And you know, the Jewish people need to be able to walk down the streets and be. Diversity is great. In every community, in every society, we should have diversity, but there should be respect. We should respect even somebody who totally disagrees with me. That doesn't mean I need to be hostile against him. He has his thoughts, I have my thoughts. We should respect one another, debate it, and agree to disagree if that's the case. But at the moment, like we've covered in this program, it seems to be the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, we don't like to use that word, Jew hatred that is rising in society, not just in our nation, probably more in some of the other nations and in the USA too. We need to start to take it seriously and realize something has to be done to turn the whole thing around.
And Alistair, I just want to highlight some more extracts from this really important parliamentary report looking into anti-Semitism at our universities and higher education. It says here that the report also noted that anti-Semitism often goes unreported as what it calls microaggression that can demonstrate how prejudice is normalised without anyone realising its impact, and said among the examples the report cites are friends telling one Jewish student to settle a bill because they can afford it, another Jewish student being told at a party, "You are too pretty to be Jewish." We also see that the president of the King's College London Israel Society, Early Tubelum, who leads that student group, told the JNS that online anti-Semitic harassment merits far more attention than it's given in the parliamentary report. And they say that people often feel far more empowered spewing hatred towards Jewish students from the comfort of their mobile phones. The first-year student said, "When I was outed as a supporter of Zionism or to a member of a large student chat group, I was faced with vile and humiliating anti-Semitism." So again, yes, we have a problem, but also the way that social media plays a role, particularly for this generation now, where they have a parallel life. They have the real world, and then their whole lives virtually on social media as well. And this is where a lot of the attacks are coming from other students and stuff as well. So this isn't really mentioned within the report, which I think is a huge problem to actually tackle Jew hatred on our social media platforms.
Yeah, the thing is, you mentioned there about not being reported, and I think a lot of that is just out of a lack of confidence in the system to do anything about it, and it almost, by reporting it, you're bringing more attention to yourself, and then you're opening up to even more of the attacks on social media and so on. And that's the sad situation in our society at the moment, that people can be unseen but can be causing, I mean, you hear in schools of bullying, not face-to-face bullying, but bullying that goes on after you've left the school through using mobile phones, etc. And it's certainly the case for the Jewish people, and it's wrong. And if it's wrong, it needs to be confronted. And for anyone who's facing and receiving any kind of bullying, harassment, report it, because it needs to be reported in order for it to be put right. And if it's kept under wraps, look, it's a very sad situation if you feel by reporting it you're bringing more attention to yourself. But I think we've got to think almost to the next generation and think, look, if I don't do something about it, how much worse is it going to be for the students who follow me in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? So it's wrong in our society. We need to be policing every situation far more effectively, and giving confidence to these marginalized groups of people who are being picked upon. We need to stand with them. We need to stand against what they're doing.
Absolutely. And one of the big recommendations of this findings of this report is that universities should adopt the IHRA, working definition on anti-Semitism. So that's the International Holocaust Memorial Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. So just to quote what it is, they say that anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards the Jewish community, institutions or religious facilities. They go on to say that the manifestation might include the targeting of the State of Israel, conceived as a Jewish collective. However, criticisms of Israel are similar to that levelled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism frequently charges that Jews with conspiracy to harm humanity is often used to blame Jews for why things go wrong, as expressed in speech, writing, visual forms and actions, and employs sinister stereotypes and negative character traits. So contemporary examples of anti-Semitism in public life, the media, schools, the workplace, and in all religious spheres could be taken into account the overall context to include but not limited calling for and aiding for the justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical racial ideology or an extremist views of religion, and also means that saying that Israel is committing acts of genocide is essentially anti-Semitic. So what it does is it broadens it to Israel and anti-Zionism, which is a good thing. We've got about a minute and a half left of the program, so it's important, isn't it, that we encourage and empower the Jewish community to know, as Christians, they're not alone. And I think it's important, isn't it, for those grandparents and parents that have their children at universities, that they, as Christians, can befriend the Jewish communities and say, look, I'm standing with you. I'm going to go against the tide. I'm not tolerating this hatred.
Yeah, I think we mustn't hide behind any sort of self-preservation, if you want to call it that. We need to be very, very strong in standing with the Jewish people and letting them know that a lot of Christian community look at them as true friends and would stand with them no matter what attacks might come against and whatever pressures we might be under. Well, I certainly, for one, would stand with my Jewish brothers and sisters.
And also a way that we can confront Jew hatred is if we see people talking about Jewish people in a horrendous way, confront them. And don't allow it to happen. Don't allow it to happen anywhere near you. And if you do have problems, then you need repentance and deliverance. Exactly. That's another way, isn't it?
Don't be silent. You know, that's a command out of the Old Testament, but it's a New Testament too. Don't be silent when you see wrongdoing. Stand up against it.
Alistair, thank you so much for being my guest on this week's Middle East Report. You've done a great job. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you for watching at home. I think it's imperative that as Christians, we need to be watchmen and women on the walls of Jerusalem. And that means watching what happens in our universities and in higher education. And we can't accept Jew hatred against Jewish students or faculty staff facing hatred because they are Jewish, particularly in this time. So it's imperative that we are aggressive and attack anti-Semitism, because we know that this comes from the enemy himself. So I want to thank you for watching this week's edition of the Middle East Report.